Ha ha! You thought there was no possible election outcome in Israel worse than Mr. Netanyahu being returned to power after 13 years in office, but you'd be wrong. The actual outcome has left Netanyahu 2 seats behind his rival Benny Gantz of the so-called Blue and White Party, meaning he's well short, impossibly short, of a right-wing Zionist nationalist coalition government. Not least because Mr. Gantz cannot possibly share power with Benjamin Netanyahu, whom he described throughout the election campaign, the second election in just 5 months, as virtually a crook who should be in court, who should be under prosecution. Gantz can therefore not form a grand national coalition with the Likud party as long as Netanyahu remains in control of that party. Now, Netanyahu needs to be prime minister to avoid appearing in court in just a couple of weeks from now on serious charges of corruption. How, therefore, can he cling on to power? Well, there is one way. He could turn to the man he broke with a year ago, Avigdor Lieberman. Avigdor Lieberman makes Mr. Netanyahu look like a Boy Scout leader. Lieberman's practically dripping in the hatred that he feels towards the occupied Palestinian people, who had no vote, of course, in this or any election for well over half a century in which they've lived under Israeli military rule. He is forever looking at ways of virtually annihilating the presence of Palestinians inside the boundaries of today's state of Israel. Not only that, he's for war with all of Israel's neighbors. The one thing that stops Lieberman and Netanyahu forming a coalition is Netanyahu's strong adherence to the bloc of orthodox religious parties in the Knesset. Lieberman, you see, while stripping in blood from tooth and claw, is secular, don't you know? So that would require Netanyahu to drop his alliance with the orthodox parties if Lieberman was going to metaphorically get into bed with him. Although Lieberman is nothing if not flexible. It could be that if the offer is good enough, Mr. Netanyahu and Lieberman could get back into a double harness, and then you'd have Netanyahu plus. You'd have hawkish, violent, expansionist, annexationist Israeli government, even more extreme than the one that you have become used to under Mr. Netanyahu. 5 months ago, the so-called Arab Israelis, the Palestinian population who were trapped inside the border of Israel in 1948, within the Green Line, we call it, they stood as a myriad of parties 5 months ago and did miserably badly. This time, they formed one single voting bloc, and they did particularly well. They have pledged their support for a Zionist general who destroyed Gaza. That's Mr. Gantz. They have offered to support him in power. It's all a big mess. The president has about 25 more days to sort it out, to recognize one man or one group, one coalition that can form a stable government. If he can't do that, we may well plunge into a third Israeli general election within 1 calendar year, unprecedented even by the tumultuous standards of Israeli politics. So we don't know who has won the Israeli elections. We only know who has lost. The 5 million Palestinians living under siege in Gaza, under occupation in the West Bank, and under annexation in East Jerusalem.